If you guys haven't seen, Dana White recently said that the UFC Noche 2 or UFC at the Sphere is going to be the greatest UFC card of all time. It's going to be the greatest event of all time. So Dana White is looking to make this thing at least at the same level as UFC 300. So today I wanted to build the card from start to finish because as of right now, we have speculation for the main event, but we don't know exactly what's going to be on the main event. We don't have any fighters on the card. So I wanted to build not only the best UFC event that we can make right now, but one that's worthy of kind of at the same level of like a UFC 300. If Dana White really wants to put on that type of event at UFC Noche 2, at the UFC, is it 304? 306, excuse me, UFC 306. I have the order of the card on my other monitor here because I need to make sure that I am going through these pictures in order because you never know, sometimes things get messed up over there. I just want to be as close as possible. So today, guys, I'm going to show you the fights. I'd love to know what you guys think about it down below. We're going to get into it just a second. Before we do that, I do want to say hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's start off with the early prelim opener. So, guys, the early prelim opener I have for you is going to be Yair Rodriguez versus Calvin Kattar. If Dana White's looking to make this event like UFC 300 or at the same level of UFC 300, you would have to have a Cody Garbrandt, Davison Figueiredo type opener. I believe this is at that same level. And you're talking about making a Noche UFC. You want a lot of Mexican fighters on here. Now, Yair Rodriguez would definitely get a big pop over there. And for the first fighter on the early prelims, I think this is a fantastic fight. I think it makes a lot of sense in the division. This would definitely get a lot of people talking about a UFC fight. Let's continue on to the next fight. Next fight is going to be Victor Altamirano versus Alessandro Costa. I think this is also a fantastic fight. It makes sense in the division. Both guys on a roll. Both guys are looking very promising. The matchup for this fight is really intriguing. Victor Altamirano, of course, would get the pop from the fans, and it's just the name value for this one isn't necessarily there, but man, when these two go at it, this would be a banger. Let's continue on to the next fight. Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Yasmin Urigaray. Hey, we do have to have these types of fights on the card. One on the early prelims, one on the prelims, and one on the main card. This doesn't exactly scream exciting, but Yasmin Urigaray was, I believe she was on the last UFC Noche. I believe she was. I could be wrong about that. Please correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments. But regardless, she get a big pop from the fans over there. MMA fans in general just really like Karolina. I like Karolina. I'm a big fan of Karolina. I've been watching her for a long time. So this fight, it does make sense in the division at this point for both of their careers. Let's continue on to the last fight over on the early prelims, that being Nate the Train Landwehr versus Fernando Padilla. I think it's time to give Fernando Padilla a better fight. Nate Landwehr is just, I believe he's outside of the top 15 right now. No matter what Nate Landwehr does, he makes it extremely exciting. Nate Landwehr should have been on UFC 300. Fernando Padilla is a very exciting fighter in himself, and I think when these two go at it, they will have the crowd screaming. This has potential for fight of the night. Do you think the crowd would be even cheering for Nate Landwehr? Because he does get a good pop from the fans. But regardless, man, makes sense of the division. The fight's an absolute banger. I will not keep repeating myself, guys. Let's move on to the regular prelims. Now, the opening for the prelims is going to be Daniel Zellhuber versus Ismail Bonfim. Now, excuse me, Ismail Bonfim has a little bit of a pixelated image over here, but that's okay. Like I said, guys, like a lot of the reasoning for these fights, makes a lot of sense in the division. Daniel Zellhuber belongs over there. I believe he was also on the first Noche UFC card, and I would pick Daniel Zellhuber in this fight. It's a favorable matchup for him, and I don't know if the UFC is still trying to promote Ismail Bonfim that much, but they're definitely trying to do it with Daniel Zellhuber, and Daniel Zellhuber has been looking pretty good as of lately. So, makes sense for the division. It'd be a really good feel moment. Daniel Zellhuber really could encapsulate that feeling in the arena. He has all the potential in the world. Let's continue on to the next fight. Renato Moicano, Beneil Dariush. Moicano did great on UFC 300. Moicano's becoming a star. Moicano has expressed his interest in fighting Beneil Dariush. It makes sense for Beneil Dariush at this point in the rankings. He needs to take on a guy like Renato Moicano. It's a winnable fight for Renato Moicano. The UFC would absolutely want to push this, and I would imagine that both guys would take this fight because, again, well, we know that Money Moicano will take the fight, but Beneil Dariush is typically down for everything. Fight makes sense. Fight's a banger. Hardcore MMA fans love Beneil Dariush. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time, but Renato Moicano is perfect if Dana White wants to make this event at the Sphere one of the greatest events of all time. Let's move on to the next fight. We have Mackenzie Dern versus Lupi Godinez. I think it's time to give Lupi Godinez a top contender, and for some reason, Mackenzie Dern is still a top contender. Fight makes sense in the division. You can use Mackenzie Dern all you want for clicks. I guarantee you she would definitely drive some pay-per-view sales. Lupi Godinez would get the pop over from the fans. It's a fight up in the division. She is a better fighter than Mackenzie Dern, and hey, throw Mackenzie Dern in anything, and you'll have a bunch of Sims following her. So that's guaranteed some pay-per-view buys over there. You got to have one on the prelims, but let's continue on to the main fight on the prelims. And this was almost a different fight. I picked Petr Yan versus Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo, of course, having that Mexican heritage, right? I know that Henry Cejudo talks about being American, but he is also Mexican at the end of the day. Henry Cejudo wanted to fight Rob Font, okay? That's understandable. It's a winnable fight for Rob Font. It's a good call-out. For some reason, I think the UFC and Dana White really, well, not for some reason, they don't like Henry Cejudo, and I could see Dana White making this matchup in spite of Henry Cejudo. Get him out of here. I don't want him to fight anymore, but Henry Cejudo versus Petr Yan could bring some really, really hardcore excitement for MMA. They would put on a great fight, and Petr Yan would absolutely annihilate Henry Cejudo. Dana White likes this fight. It's Henry Cejudo might take this fight because Petr Yan is a top contender. A win over Petr Yan could launch you into a title fight, and Petr Yan doesn't necessarily deserve a title fight yet. He needs 1 or 2 more wins, so it's a fight that I can actually see the UFC making. I don't think they're going to go with Rob Font for Henry Cejudo, and I think this, honestly, I think it does make sense in the division. Henry Cejudo still is a top contender. Let's continue on, guys, to the main card. We have a 6-fight main card for you guys. This is the one where I don't know if I'm going to get any backlash for, but if we're making a superstar card, if we're making the best card we can possibly make for UFC Noche, Tony Ferguson, Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz recently posted about visiting the UFC. Nick Diaz, or I don't know if it was the UFC PI, he was visiting somewhere in the UFC, and Nick Diaz still has expressed that he wants to fight. Tony Ferguson has also expressed that he wants to fight. Why not put 2 guys that cannot fight anymore and have them fight each other? This makes sense for both of them. It could be a double retirement fight, and this would honestly be one of the biggest fights on the card. It really would be. It'd be perfect for Nick Diaz. It'd be perfect for Tony Ferguson. You wouldn't have to see one of them sit back and get absolutely annihilated. Like, and if they have to fight, this is the way to do it. And honestly, it's a really big fight. I'd personally get excited for it, to be honest with you. So, opening up the main card, I have Tony Ferguson versus Nick Diaz. Let's continue on to Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg. I think this fight is the next fight. You should make it flyweight. Brandon Moreno did express that he's taking time off. I don't know how much time he said he was taking off, but if you want to bring Brandon Moreno for UFC Noche, Brandon Moreno really does like he seems to, at least. He seems to like the fan aspect whenever he's fighting. It just in general, actually, people kind of get behind Brandon Moreno, but I mean, for his people, and he would want to get a win back because last time he lost in front of his people, right? Steve Erceg definitely deserves a Brandon Moreno fight. A lot of people consider him to be the champion. I thought he won his last fight. This makes sense in the division, and it'd be a really, really, really exciting fight. Let's keep going up the main card to Movsar Evloev versus Diego Lopez 2. I think it's time to push Diego Lopez and give him a rematch with Movsar Evloev. I understand it's a big jump in the division, but I think, honestly, with the hype that Diego Lopez has right now, he's proven himself to be a contender. He's proven himself to be dangerous. He gave Movsar by far his toughest fight. I think it was tougher. Was it tougher than Arnold Allen? I don't know. Arnold Allen's a pretty big dog over there. Regardless, for the longest time, he was the toughest fight for Movsar Evloev and still might be. This is a banger fight. I actually am very intrigued to see in this fight, but you can't have UFC Noche. You can't have a UFC 300 level type event. You can't have UFC 306 without Diego Lopez on this card. So I hope that the UFC actually ends up putting this together. I'd be very interested to see how the rematch goes, and this would be a very, very big fight. Let's continue on to the featured fight on the card. Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira, BMF title fight. If they're looking to do this same type of card, they're definitely going to have a BMF title fight on there. They're going to have the 3 title fights, and of course, just with the BMF, it worked out last time. Max Holloway has fought Charles Oliveira before. There's history over there, which is very, very interesting, and Charles Oliveira has expressed wanting to fight Max Holloway for the BMF title. I'm sure Max Holloway would be down. Can't see the dude saying no, and Max Holloway doesn't really have too many options right now besides Ilia Topuria, and Ilia Topuria doesn't even want to fight him. So this would be a true BMF title fight. It'd be a fan favorite fight. Max Holloway was trending after UFC 300 and still is. Arguably had the greatest UFC moment of all time. Charles Oliveira is one of the biggest stars and fan favorites of the UFC. This would definitely be the fight that pulls everybody into the card more than anything. And it's a featured fight. It could have the same kind of thing that we had at UFC 300. And honestly, let me know what you guys think down below. I think Max pieces up Charles Oliveira, and I think he finishes him again. I really do believe that. Unfortunately, though, there's no way Max Holloway can possibly beat the UFC 300 moment that he had, but still, this would be an incredible fight. This would be the biggest selling point for the entire card. Let's move on to the co-main event. You could have saw this coming. This is definitely going to be on the card. This is 100% going to be on the card. I got to be realistic over here. It's Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 3. Look, Alexa Grasso, can't lie. Alexa Grasso will get clicks. Everybody's talking about Alexa Grasso's feet constantly. Is her smile or her feet? Like, honestly, guys, pick one. It's crazy. I think there's a correct one to pick, but Alexa Grasso is becoming a superstar. She will be beloved by the crowd over there, and it's a winnable fight for her at this point. Valentina Shevchenko is aging fast. She hasn't looked good recently. It could be one of those really feel-good moments for Alexa Grasso. I don't know how at home it is, but of course we know that Alexa Grasso does have that heritage, and this is going to be the co-main event. This is going to be. I'm almost sure of it. Let's continue on to the main event, though. I don't absolutely hate the fight. I'd rather have Wei Li personally, but I want to be realistic for this card. Let's continue on to the main event. A main event that a lot of people already think is going to be the main event. So I actually do believe that this will be the co-main in the main event. Sean O'Malley, Merab Dvalishvili. Sean O'Malley said he's going to fight Merab. Merab said he's going to fight Sean O'Malley. The Sphere is the time to do it, and if you want to have the greatest card of all time, Dana White will do it like UFC 299, where he stacks the card in order and puts like a Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira thing on the undercard, so they can say, oh my god, look at the big superstar that Sean O'Malley is. Sean O'Malley's star is rising, but he's not just there yet, and this would be the perfect push for him. This would be the perfect main event as of right now to end off UFC 306, Noche UFC 2. This is the entire card that we have for you guys. I'll read it off to you one more time, and let me know what you guys think down below about it afterwards. Yair Rodriguez versus Calvin Kattar, Victor Altamirano versus Alessandro Costa, Karolina Kovalkiewicz versus Yasmin Yorgui, Nate Landwehr versus Fernando Padilla, Daniel Zellhuber versus Ismail Bonfim, Renato Moicano versus Benil Dariush, Mackenzie Dern versus Lupi Godinez, Piotr Jan versus Henry Cejudo, Tony Ferguson versus Nick Diaz, Brandon Moreno versus Steve Erceg, Diego Lopez versus Movsar Evloev 2, Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira 2, Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 3, and Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili. Guys, let me know what you think about the card down below, and go check out 5th Round on Twitter. Thank you very, very much for letting me use that concept image for the thumbnail. It means a lot, guys. Go check him out on Twitter. It's absolutely fantastic artwork over there, guys. Let me know what you thought about the card down below. Thank you very much for watching. Check out this video on screen right now, where I actually have a little bit of beef with the MMA Clown Show. Check it out over here, guys. I'll see you over there. Take care.